The day had already climbed to its brightest point when Hung realized the house was too quiet for noon. Noon, in their valley, had a sound. 2 chickens arguing about worms, the tractor at the far end of the lane coughing itself awake, a vendor's cart rattling metal on metal, promising ice and sugar to anyone with coins and heat. Inside the house, noon meant the kettle performing its small opera and a child's 2-footed thump as she ran circles around the table. On most days, Tuka would be back from the garden by now, carrying a basket that smelled like earth and garlic, a smudge across her cheek that she'd forget about until evening. Today, the kettle sang alone. The chickens kept their own counsel. The table had no circles around it. Hung stood in the doorway and frowned into the glare. "It's noon," he said to the yard, because the yard knew things. "Where are my people?" He waited for the ordinary answer. Han's small voice from somewhere improbable. "Here, Papa." And when it didn't come, he did the thing a man does when the first worry is still polite. He gave the world a small errand. He boiled water for noodles. He cracked an egg. He told himself that if his stomach had something to do, his mind might follow. The noodles tasted like the ones he'd eaten in the city when he was 20 and broke and pleased about it. Slippery, familiar, unconvincing. He ate fast anyway, burned his tongue, and laughed at himself aloud. "Idiot," he said fondly. The word landed on an empty room. He cleaned the bowl, set it upside down to dry, and reached for his phone. There were messages from Lynn at the mill, photos of boards newly stacked and one of a bolt the size of a baby's wrist, cracked clean through. There was a missed call from a number he knew too well to enjoy. James, who only called when he had something that didn't fit in a message. Hung sent a quick, "Later, on my way to you," and pocketed the phone. A breeze wandered by, curious. He leaned out past the door and shouted toward the chicken shed. "Chea, Han." His voice was large enough to startle the dog awake under the jackfruit tree. The dog shook itself out of sleep and offered an opinion. 3 warning barks and 1 half-hearted wag. "Helpful," Hung said. He took the side path past the compost heap, past the wash line with its confession of socks, to the shed where they kept feed and small disasters. The door stood halfway open, a question. Inside, the feed sacks were tidy. The broom leaned where it should, and on the shelf, the jar of seed shells that Han liked to count had been tipped over and righted again. The shells sat inside, guilty and orderly. He saw, on the packed earth floor, 2 things. The first was a circle of dust with the ghost of a sandal in it, Han's small heel, slightly turned inward as if the foot had been mid-thought. The second was nothing at all. The shed had the particular emptiness of a place that has just had a person removed from it. Hung felt his stomach shift into a new shape. He took out his phone and called. "Hello?" The voice at the other end belonged to a woman who had learned the trick of sounding both busy and available. Tuan's office, by the sound of it, James's closest ally and Hung's reluctant conscience. "It's me," he said. "I'm at home." "Is Kia with you?" "Not with me." The woman's tone sharpened, because worry loves company. "Why?" "She said she was going to feed the chickens," he said. "She took Han with her. They haven't come back." "How long?" He checked the useless clock in his head and told the truth. "Longer than I like." "Call her first," she said. "Then call your mother-in-law. Then come here. James is pacing holes in the floor anyway." "I'll do that," he said, and hung up before she could ask him to be calm. He called CA. The phone rang in the kitchen, where he had left it on the shelf by the salt. He stared at it with a grim affection. "Traitor," he said, but the word had no edge. CA was exactly the kind of person who left her phone behind because her hands were busy and the sun was good. He called his mother-in-law, who answered on the second ring and turned the occasion into a small lecture about soup and salt and the weather, and finally, when she degenerated into a cough, told him she was here yesterday. She left early. Today I have not seen the child. Perhaps she is working. Hung thanked her, made a sound that could be mistaken for gratitude, and pocketed the phone. He stood in the yard and scanned the edges of places, the way a hunter reads a field. Chickens unbothered, dog too willing to nap, gate unlatched, as always, road empty and arrogant in the sun. He started with neighbors, as one does. He asked with the meekness that forces politeness into mouths. Have you seen a mother and child? She is 18, with a braid like a rope. The child is almost 2, loves geese, answers to Han if you ask nicely. No, said one neighbor, wiping his hands on his shirt and pointing vaguely at the horizon. But the world is large and the child is small. Keep looking. No, said another, who had that special rural talent for making no into a full meal. And if you don't find them by dark, call the police. These days. The man trailed off, making a face that implied that these days contained every sin and rumor that had ever crossed a road. Thank you, Hung said. He meant it, even if it tasted like dust. By the time he reached the lane, he had invented a dozen explanations. They had gone to the pond to look for tadpoles and stayed too long. They had followed a vendor's cart to the top of the hill to see if the vendor was made entirely of sugar. They had fallen into conversation with Great Aunt and been subjected to 5 hours of stories about the war and mint tea until the son forgot that it had a bedtime. He clung to the kindest one. They had simply taken the long way home. The phone rang. He answered without reading. Yes. Where are you? James. The voice of an engine that has just learned it is missing a critical bolt. At my gate. Come to workshop 9, James said. I have something you need to hear, and it cannot wait. Everything can wait, Hung said. But he said it kindly, because James had been his ally on days when the ledger lied and the saw bit back. My child is... He did not finish the sentence. He was superstitious enough to avoid certain words. I know, James said quietly. In the background, Hung heard the warehouse echo, metal, concrete, air that had lost all memory of rain. We'll talk fast. Then we'll look. Hung hesitated long enough to hate himself, then agreed, because sometimes the fastest way to get where you're going is to take the detour that saves the bridge. He left a note on the table, went to the mill. If you get back first, call me. Don't be brave. H. He added a smiley face because love is ridiculous and must be allowed to be. On his way to the truck, he shouted once more toward the shed. Han! The sound stretched into the field and startled a flock of doves into proving that surprise is beautiful when you have wings. The road to Workshop 9 cut through a setback of hills like a knife with a grievance. Somewhere along the way, the county had stopped pretending the potholes were temporary. The truck recognized each one the way a body recognizes old injuries. Hung arrived to find James outside, standing next to the biggest machine in the building like a man who has discovered that the anchor he tied his boat to is, in fact, a goat. She's dead, James said, patting the iron casing with more tenderness than the machine had earned. She died the day they shipped her. We have been performing CPR in shifts. Hung circled the machine, taking in the way the belts sulked, the sprockets confessed, the bolts told a story with their crooked teeth. And the importer? Apologies and incense, James said, and an invoice for parts we do not need. Liquidate it, Hung said. Sell her for organs, not as a promise. Transfer the big orders to workshops 2 and 5. Pay the overtime and bring soup. Order the Thai unit. James exhaled. Already did. You taught me to do the right thing and apologize later. You improved the lesson, Hung said. Skip the apology. They moved to the shade of the loading dock where the chairs were more suggestion than furniture. James picked at a splinter, glanced at the gate, and lowered his voice. Do "Do you remember Trang?" he asked. Hung grunted. Everyone remembered Trang. She had worked in accounting until she didn't, and then she had gone away to accumulate a degree that would, ideally, put her as far from their ledgers as possible. Her father had a face that belonged on currency, and fingers that belonged in other people's pockets. "He's behind the dung mess," James said. "The whole thing. The double invoicing, the ghost pallets, the midnight trucks that always arrived empty and left full." Hung rubbed his jaw. He disliked being right. He disliked even more the suspicion that he would have been right sooner if he had let himself look harder. "And you can prove it." "I can prove too much," James said. "Invoices with ink still wet. Drivers who will sing for 5 million. A fingerprint on a padlock." He forgot that greed leaves fingerprints even when hands are careful. Hung closed his eyes briefly to listen to what his common sense would say if given a chance. It said, "Do not be merciful with people who practice harm as a craft. Mercy belongs to the clumsy, not the cruel." "And Trang?" he asked. "She apologized." "She did," James said. "But apologies don't repair roofs." And her father didn't apologize because he does not know the language. Hung thought of the men in their workshops who had eaten the last of their rice while the accounts waited for money that had been designed to never arrive. He thought of women who had folded laundry and hope in the same basket. He thought of the baby at the hospital who had learned to gain 100 grams in a week, and of Han's toes, the ones she wiggled when she decided geese were funny instead of terrifying. "Follow the law," he said. "Let it do the arithmetic we don't want to do. Bring him to court. We will feed our people with the truth." James nodded, slow and satisfied, like a man who has finally chosen a road and found it had fewer holes than advertised. "I already opened the file," he said. "I wanted your blessing." "You have it," Hung said. "Do not be kind to the wrong person." They shook hands, a habit that both mocked and honored the contracts they'd learned to distrust. "Go," James said then, abrupt. "Get your people. Work is a dog. It will always be at the door when you come back. Children are birds. If you call them too late, they sleep." Hung did not waste thanks on another man's good advice. He ran. The house greeted him with the lie of calm. He could tell it was a lie because the air inside held the wrong temperature. A house that has been left politely for an hour keeps its cool differently than a house that has been neglected for 5. He called again, "Ka, Han," and listened to his voice settle like dust. On the table, his note waited with the patience of paper. He checked the shelf for the little blue cap Han wore when she played nurse to the dog. It wasn't there. He checked the hooks by the door for Sia's sweater. It was there, which meant nothing except that whoever left had not been cold. He went to the lane again. He went farther. He counted steps the way men count when they need to be convinced they are moving. 100 to the turning, 200 to the bend, 300 to the old stump where they used to sit and share a bottle of soda as if it were wine. He counted past memory and into invention. At the 4th house, a man with a broom looked at him and then at the sun and said, "If you have not found them by now, they have found a shadow to sit in. Sit too for a minute, then keep going." Hung did not sit. He kept going. He passed 2 fields, a dog that offered directions with a single indolent ear, a child he did not recognize who told him earnestly that mothers are often found where fathers have most recently lost them. He thanked the child. It felt like prayer. At the corner where the road pretended to be a riverbank, he saw a sheet of plywood leaned against a tree and pinned around the edges with the heavy stones that keep old news from becoming wind. On the plywood, someone had chalked "meeting." Underneath, in a hand that had only learned to be official, was written, "Crime is up. Counterfeits are up. Keep your eyes open, your doors latched, your children near." There was an arrow pointing toward the community hall and a time that had already happened. Hung blew out a breath that tasted like disbelief. When trouble decides to come, it sends invitations to everyone, and the only surprise is how promptly it expects them to RSVP. He turned back toward the house because he needed to stand at the door and listen to it not answering him. At the gate, the dog greeted him with a stick and a hopeful expression. He took the stick. He threw it. He let the small stupidity of it fill a minute that could not be filled with anything else. On the second throw, he noticed the footprints beyond the jackfruit tree. Not many. 2 sets. One larger than a child's but smaller than his. The heel turning in, a familiar angle. One tiny, running. The larger prints led toward the lane, then veered right, then disappeared where the ground hardened and the neighbor's pig had decided to rototill its way to joy. Hung knelt and pressed his palm into the dirt as if the ground could tell him something he had not already guessed. He stood and called, a last time and with less hope, "Han." A woman's voice answered, and for 3 seconds his heart soared and then fell less gracefully than anything falling should. It was not C.A. It was Auntie Hoa, who lived 2 doors down and outside of whom the village would have collapsed years ago. "Hung," she called, "come here, boy." He obeyed because that was her gift. Even grown men obeyed. "I saw a man," she said, and her eyes sharpened as the picture came back. He passed with a child on his hip. The child had a red sandal that kept falling off. He kept shoving it back on, then gave up and put it in his pocket. The child was protesting like a champion. The man told her not to wake the old woman Khan, Hung said before he could stop himself, and the name tasted like an old fight. Where did he go? "Up," she said, "to his mother's." He came from nowhere and went everywhere. Hung did not ask why she had not stopped him. She would have if she had known what to stop him from. He said thank you instead, because a man who wants to live long learns early to say thank you to women who tell him who he is. He drove the hill in a gear too low for common sense, and when he reached the yard at the top, he saw Khan sitting on the threshold like a penitent who has already decided which sins are negotiable. The old woman, Khan's mother, rocked in her chair, a fan in her hand, doing nothing useful to the heat. "You took her," Hung said. There was no point to ceremony. Khan lifted his head. He looked like a man who has never slept and cannot remember why sleep was once attractive. "I brought her home," he said. "She is my child." "She is also mine," Hung said, and then, because the truth rarely comes in straight lines, added, "She is most of all Ka's, and Ka does not know where her daughter is. Do you understand the arithmetic of that?" "I understand possession," Khan said, and smile didn't suit his face. "Law is always a day behind those who act." The old woman stopped fanning. "Enough," she said. "You two will not scare the baby. She has finally slept. You will save your dramas for a place where roofs do not have ears." "Does Ka know?" Hung asked. "She will," Khan said, which is not the same as yes. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Hung repeated, and made the word as heavy as he could without dropping it on the old woman's floor. "She is staying," Khan said, and the sentence tried and failed to be a fact. Hung looked at the old woman, who met his glance with the tired expertise of someone who has raised men into their mistakes. "Take your argument outside," she said, "and bring me back the truth when you found it." Hung stepped back. He wanted a fight, but not this fight. Not here, where the baby might hear. He tried to imagine what Ka was doing at this exact second. He saw her on the lane, hair undone, mouth chapped from calling. He saw her at the police station, the desk officer explaining, with the patience that should be reserved for children and criminals, that the 24-hour rule was a law, not a suggestion. "I will bring her mother in an hour," he said. "If you mean to do this clean, you will open your door when we come and tell the truth. If you mean to do it dirty, the law will clean it for you." Khan held his gaze. The old fight between them did not wake. It had never slept. "An hour," the old woman said, deciding for both of them because the village had not fallen apart yet. "If you are late, your reasons must be better than your punctuality." Hung left before he told them what kind of reasons he had. At the bottom of the hill, the road seemed shorter than before, and he suspected, not for the first time, that time is a jealous animal, reluctant to pull evenly. He drove too fast, then too slow, then just right, and all of it felt wrong. When he reached the house, he found Ka on the front step, knees in her arms, the look in her eyes a geography he never wanted to learn. She stood when she saw him, and then she didn't. "Tell me," she said, and the words had no room for anything he wished were true. "I know where she is," he said. "Alive?" The word cracked. "Yes," he said, "at his mother's. He took her," he thought. Hung stopped because he could not bear to be the one to translate what Khan thought into a language that would fit Ka's ears. "We go now," he said instead. "We go and we bring her back." Kay's mouth did something he had never seen it do, went perfectly still. "And then?" she asked. "After we bring her back?" "After," Hung said, "we bring the law." She nodded once, a soldier receiving orders from herself. She wiped her face with both hands the way you wipe a table clean before setting the good plates. "Let me get my sandals," she said. "I will not meet my child barefoot." He wanted to say that sandals were not the thing that mattered, but he kept his mouth shut. Love is full of rituals that look like superstition and are, in fact, engineering. They walked together to the truck. The dog tried to come and was denied. It sat down in righteous offense and then forgave them, as dogs do in the space of a heartbeat. As they rolled toward the hill, a wind moved through the oranges and set them chiming. Hung listened and told himself the sound was luck rehearsing. He did not believe in luck, but he believed in rehearsal. At the bend where the road lifted its hem to let them pass, Ka spoke without looking at him. "When we bring her home," she said, "you will stand with me at the commune office. We will write down the things that need writing. We will draw a line that can carry weight. I will," Hung said. "I will stand." "And if his mother cries?" she asked, not hard, only bracing. "Then we will cry with her," Hung said, "and still do what is right." Sa closed her eyes and opened them again. "Good," she said, and the road straightened as if pleased to be of use. They reached the gate at the top of the hill before the hour had decided to finish. The old woman waited with the baby balanced against her shoulder, one hand on the child's back and one on the door frame as if preventing both from falling at once. Khan sat on the threshold with his elbows on his knees, the way men sit when they have learned and unlearned nothing. "Come take your child," the old woman said to Ka, and it was not surrender, only clarity. "She is yours in the ways that matter." Ka crossed the yard, gathered the girl to her, and the world made a sound that is made only when two things that have been separated remember themselves into one. "Tomorrow," Khan said into the quiet, "we talk about how she will live." "With whom?" "When tomorrow," Sa said, and there was iron in it. "At the office. With paper. With law." Hung did not need to add anything. The law would bring its own voice. He helped Ka into the truck and buckled Han into the stranger's embrace of the car seat. The child regarded him as if he were a new version of an old joke, and then decided that being held was an excellent punchline. The old woman lifted a hand and then put it down again without waving. On the way down the hill, Han fell asleep, her mouth open in the particular shape babies use to teach adults humility. CA watched her without blinking. Hung watched the road and told himself that roads, like laws, are only as good as the people who keep them repaired. They were half a kilometer from home when James called. Hung kept his eyes on the lane and pressed the phone to his ear. "We filed," James said. "It begins." "Everything begins," Hung said. Keep the men paid. Keep the books honest. I'll be there after I make our house ready to hold a storm." He ended the call, and for the first time since noon, believed his own voice. At home, the kettle had cooled. He lit the stove again. He held his child while the water learned to sing. He watched his wife's hands fuss the straps on the car seat as if sewing the future to the present. He listened for footsteps at noon and heard them finally exactly where they were supposed to be, under his own roof. The kettle's second song ended with the same small sigh as the first, and for a long minute Hung just stood there with his palm flat on the counter, feeling the old pine plank give slightly under his weight. In the bedroom, Han slept on her side with one hand raised as if to catch a dream before it fell. Sia sat cross-legged on the floor beside the bed, back straight, shoulders squared, the posture of a woman who did not intend to be moved by anything less than an earthquake. "When she wakes," Ka said without turning, "we go to the commune." "We go," Hung answered. "What if he doesn't come?" "He will," Hung said. "His mother will make him. If not for us, then for the sake of the village." Doors like hers do not like to be whispered about. Ka made a sound that could have been a laugh but decided to be breath. The room held three kinds of silence: the easy sleep of a child, the taut quiet of a woman who is choosing her next word, the attention of a man who has learned that sometimes help means waiting within reach. Han woke as if she had been asked to by the clock itself. She blinked, saw them, and smiled a smile that forgave the entire afternoon. CA lifted her and kissed the hair that smelled like bread. "We're going to see a room full of paper," she told the child. "We are going to explain to the paper how to behave." Han approved. Paper was something you could fold into birds. The commune office, like all such buildings, had been painted the color of institutional hope. Banners in red and gold promised order. A fan turned the air into polite wind. The clerk at the window had the expression of a woman who had been told too many times that her job required both neutrality and the patience of saints. Khan arrived with his mother and the look of a man who had been rehearsed all the way down the hill. Shoulders down, voice soft, yes to tea, no to trouble. He nodded at Hung. He avoided Kay's eyes and failed. When he finally looked at her, his face did a small thing that might have been apology if viewed through a forgiving lens. "Sit," the clerk said, and the four of them sat on chairs that had lost their cushion in the previous century. "Name?" the clerk asked. "Li Tiu Ka," Ka said, clear. "Age?" 18. "Address?" Sia gave it. The woman wrote with a pen that had learned to move without joy. "Child's name?" "Tiu Han," Ka said, and the sound of it steadied the floor. The clerk nodded, wrote, nodded again, then looked up. "There is no marriage certificate between the parents." "No," Ka said. The clerk permitted herself the smallest of sighs. "Then we are in law's long corridor. There are doors, but we walk. First, acknowledgement of paternity. If both agree, it is a door that opens easily. Then, agreement on custody and visitation. If both agree, we write a paper that can bear weight. If not, the court does arithmetic that no one likes." Khan cleared his throat, a small rehearsal for larger words. "I acknowledge," he said. "I am the father." The clerk's pen said thank you finally. "And custody?" "With her mother," Khan said, too quickly, and then added because he wanted to keep some thread in his hands. "For now. I want time with my child. Regular. Not as a thief, not as a guest." Sia looked at him as if measuring him for a garment he might not deserve. "You will not come to my house without asking," she said. "That is the first rule. The second rule is that you will not treat taking the child as an act of possession. You will visit. You will return her as promised. Paper will say this. Paper will say this, the clerk confirmed, writing as if she had written the same sentence many times. There will be a schedule. Saturdays, perhaps, noon to 5. The old woman may accompany if she likes, and you will not remove the child from the village without permission from the mother. Khan flinched at the last like a horse that smells a fence. I will not, he said, and in that moment it sounded like truth. Hung said nothing. He watched the clerk's pen become a small bridge between three people who had only recently remembered they lived in the same country. He felt a complicated relief, the kind that doesn't make you lighter so much as rearranges the weight into places your body knows how to carry. The clerk finished, stamped, blew on the ink, stacked the papers into a tidy future, and slid them across the desk. Sign, she said. CA signed first, with a hand that did not tremble. Khan signed second, his name suddenly thinner than it sounded when he said it aloud. The clerk witnessed. The fan tapped its own small approval against the air. Understand, the clerk said, looking at each of them in turn, that the law has the attention span of a long-lived person. If this paper is ignored, the paper will grow teeth. We will not ignore it, Sia said. The old woman, who had been quiet, put her hand on Say's forearm in a gesture so brief, Hung almost missed it. I will bring soup on Saturdays, she announced, which was her way of agreeing to the world's terms. Soup is lawful, the clerk said with a rare private smile. Outside, under the narrow strip of shade the building grudged the day, Khan stood as if the ground had moved slightly under his feet. Thank you, he said, not quite to anyone. I did not mean... He stopped, because completing that sentence required an honesty that would wobble his dignity. I will call, he said instead, a smaller truth. Call, Sa said, and when you speak to me, speak as if you remember that we are human. Khan nodded, then nodded again for the old woman's sake, and left. The old woman lingered a second to look at Han, who regarded her with the guarded curiosity of small emperors. Grow, the old woman instructed. Eat, wash your hands, do not listen to men more than necessary. Then she followed her son down the steps. Sa exhaled, a long, careful breath. Hung only then realized he had been holding his own. He reached for Sa's free hand. She let him have it. They stood like that until the shade found another road. At the mill, the air had the flavor of metal shavings and waiting. James waved Hung into the office, where a map of the province fought for wall space with a calendar of a year that refused to finish. Lynn sat on the edge of a desk, boots dusty, smile ready. We filed this morning, James said without preamble. The complaint is clean. The exhibits are ugly. The prosecutor's office is paying attention because the numbers sing in a key they recognize. And the men? Hung asked. Our people? Paid, James said, on time. We pulled from reserves and that tiny line of credit you hate. We'll hate it together when this is over. Lynn flipped a page. Also, the Thai unit is on a truck. It will pretend to arrive next week. We will pretend to believe it. Hung let himself sit for the first time since noon had gone wrong the day before. Good, he said, and the word did the work of a longer speech. We met the clerk. Paper was drawn. Khan signed. James's eyebrows climbed in the way they did when reality agreed to behave. Then the two fronts might stop shooting into each other's kitchen, he said, and the relief in his voice made Hung love him a little more. They held a short meeting under the mezzanine where the forklift liked to nap. 40 men and women in faded shirts and new worry gathered in an oval that pretended to be a circle. Hung kept it short. We were robbed, he said, and the word was not metaphor. We are not stupid, and we are not cruel. We will be patient in the way that law respects, and relentless in the way that thieves remember. Your wages will arrive. Your work is safe. We will change the things that needed changing and keep the things that make us us. An older man in the second row raised his hand not to ask a question but to steady himself. "You kept the soup on," he said. "That is all I need to know." Hung nodded, and if shy gratitude were a substance, the floor would have been wet with it. When the meeting ended and the forklift decided to wake, James pulled Hung aside. "Tonight," he said, "be home. It's going to rain." "How do you know?" "I invited it," James said, "with my stupid mouth." Hung laughed. "Then we will nail down what can be nailed and cover what cannot." The storm arrived on a schedule the clouds had always intended. The first drops were heavy scouts. The second wave was the army. The new canopy performed like a student determined to impress. Each sheet of rain slid down its slope and leapt off the edge with theatrical flourish. Inside the house, the famous leak in the corner failed to show up, which was among the purest joys a house can offer. They ate early, a practical meal with celebratory seasoning, rice, greens, egg, the kind of fish that tastes better when you can name the man who caught it. Han decided the storm was funny. She ran to the window to translate thunder into syllables and then back to the table to report. When the lightning lingered, she stuck 2 fingers in her ears and grinned as if she had invented electricity. After dinner, Sia spread the commune papers on the table the way a seamstress spreads cloth. She read every line aloud, a habit she had developed to ensure that words didn't shift when unattended. "Saturdays," she said, "noon to 5. No taking her out of the village without my permission. Calls in advance. Return as agreed. In this house, we will begin to tell time by this schedule." "We will," Hung said, "and if the paper is ignored, we will give it its teeth." Sia traced a stamp with her fingertip, then looked at him. "Do you believe he will keep to it?" "I believe his mother will," Hung said, "and sometimes that is the same thing." Sa smiled, thin but real. "We will make soup," she said, and both of them laughed for no reason that could be explained to anyone not present. The lights flickered once, twice, then held, a small mercy. In the bedroom, Han, exhausted by translating thunder, surrendered to sleep with her legs at odd angles, the posture of a child who believes the world will accommodate her. CA tucked the blanket around her, then sat on the floor and leaned her head against the bed frame. Hung brought tea and set it on the low table, and for a while they did not speak because their mouths were busy being grateful. The knock came between lightning and thunder, as if the sky had decided to provide percussion. Hung opened the door to find Khan on the step, drenched, hair flattened by the storm into a penitent's crown. The old woman was not with him. The rain performed competence behind him. 5 minutes, Khan said, palms visible, the posture of a man entering a church that does not entirely welcome him. Then I leave. Hung stepped aside because sometimes the most powerful word is not no, but not yet. Khan stood just inside the doorway, refused the chair, refused the towel, as if sitting were a luxury he could not afford. "I came to say aloud what paper already says," he began. The words were clumsy in his mouth, as if he had been taught this language by a hard teacher. "I will come Saturdays. I will call. I will not take her without permission. I will learn how to do this right." Sia appeared in the doorway to the bedroom. The storm complicated her silhouette into something heroic. "You will learn," she said, "because the alternative is not to see her." Khan nodded once. "And because I have learned that doors, when closed, are heavy." "Good," Ka said, and though the word was small, it made the room larger. "Then go home. Be a son to your mother tonight. Arrive on time on Saturday. Bring nothing that makes noise." "A small kitten makes noise," Khan said, and to his surprise, the joke did not die on the floor. CA smiled with 2 teeth. "Not a kitten," she she said. A fruit, or nothing at all. He put his hands together, not in prayer exactly, but in the acknowledgement of something living at the center of the room. Then he left, and the storm arranged a curtain for his exit. Hung closed the door and leaned his forehead against the wood for a second. He's learning, he said. C.A. poured tea into the extra cup as if he had stayed. Good, she repeated, then sipped from it herself. The rain ceased its campaign near midnight. The house, relieved of drumbeat, remembered quieter songs, the tick of cooling tin, the mouse that had not yet learned why it should keep to its lane, the baby's slow, bragging breath. Hung slept like a man who has come home from a long trip he did not plan. C.A. slept the calculated sleep of a woman auditing a ledger she had finally forced into balance. At dawn, the road had become a new map. Gullies where the old path had been, a small slice of the hill unwilling to hold its shape. The village was already out with shovels, ropes, jokes. Hung took a spade and joined the line. Men and women built a temporary bridge from pallets and unambitious hope. Someone produced a coil of wire. Someone else produced soup in a dented pot and called it breakfast. The world, injured, agreed to be mended. By mid-morning, the lane was passable for small vehicles with strong opinions. Hung returned, washed his hands in a basin that had earned a medal, and found Ka on the porch with Han and Great Aunt, who had walked down the hill bringing stories, as promised, and an onion, unasked for, which she insisted belonged in every conversation. "Saturday," Great Aunt said. "I will come and sit and make the tea and remind the man you cannot steal time." "Saturday," Sia confirmed. The words sounded less like a day and more like a contract. Hung's phone vibrated in his pocket. James again. He answered and listened. When he hung up, he looked at C.A. "They've arrested him," he said. "Trang's father, the trucks, the phantom pallets, the lot. It will take a long time to hand the truth from one office to another, but the first hand has closed around it." Kay's smile was not triumph. It was relief salted with caution. "Then pay the men on time," she said, "and keep receipts for mercy." "We will," Hung said. "We learned how." They ate lunch on the porch because food tastes best when witnessed by weather that has finally admitted defeat. After, C.A. laid the commune papers flat again and added 2 more lines in her neat hand. "Visited by father during storm. Promised to respect schedule. Witness, rain." She dated it, blew on the ink, and tucked it into a folder beneath Han's birth certificate and the tiny hospital bracelet that had once fit around a wrist the width of a thumb. "Part 3 begins," she said, surprising herself with the phrasing. "Part 3? Hung asked. "The one where we keep our promises," Ka said, "and teach paper to keep its own." That afternoon, while Han napped and the village practiced the art of pretending nothing dramatic had happened, Hung drove to the mill with a tray of coffees and the kind of bread that leaves crumbs like comets. He signed the payroll with a pen that did not stutter. He walked the floor. He put his palm on the new bolt James had already ordered, as if touch could hurry shipping. He thanked the men without making it awkward. He came home by the long way to check the bridge they had made from pallets. It held. He stopped once, halfway up the hill, to watch a line of ants relocate their world twig by twig. He felt, irrationally and perfectly, that this was what the week had been about. At dusk, the first stars risked themselves. Inside, Han insisted on folding paper into a bird and then, dissatisfied, unfolded it, flattening the crease with her small, authoritative finger. "Again," she said. "We do it again." "We do," Ka said, catching Hung's eye over the table. He nodded. The kettle sang its third, best song. The house prepared itself to receive Saturday without fear. The week folded itself like cloth, quiet, careful, with a few loose threads. Rain rinsed the roofs, sun polished the leaves. The lane healed where the storm had torn it, thanks to men with shovels and women with rope who understood that survival was simply maintenance practiced daily. Saturday, promised in ink and in memory, came. Hung swept the porch, though it didn't need sweeping. Sie laid out cups as if for an exam. Han practiced standing on one foot, delighted to fail. The air itself seemed to wait. When Khan arrived, he did not knock like a thief or stroll like a brother. He paused at the gate, asked permission with his eyes, and entered only when Ka inclined her head. He carried nothing but a bag of mandarins. He placed them on the table like a peace offering. For the first hour, he sat on the floor with Han, who taught him the serious art of stacking cups until they fell. The old woman arrived later with a thermos of soup, shaking her head at the mandarins. "Fruit is fine," she scolded, "but soup is law." Everyone laughed, including Ka, who surprised herself. The paper, it seemed, had grown teeth, but not to bite, to guard. Weeks turned into a rhythm, Saturdays with mandarins, soup, paper folded into birds, but patterns invite tests. One Saturday, Khan was late, 2 hours, the kind of late that bends trust. When he finally appeared, he looked thinner, clothes carrying the smell of smoke not from kitchens but from bars. He explained poorly, work, errands, traffic, and Han, in her blunt toddler wisdom, refused to come to his arms. She clung to T's leg and said, "No," a word as sharp as any gavel. Khan's face crumpled. "I am trying," he whispered, but Ka's eyes held him steady. "Then try earlier," she said. "Love that arrives on time tastes better." The old woman who had followed behind him added only, "Soup does not wait." That night, Hung and Ka signed a small note in the margin of their custody paper. Late, warned, forgiven. Once. It was not legal ink, but it was law enough in their house. While the family learned patience, the mill learned persistence. The case against Trang's father moved forward like a cart over stone, slow, loud, but undeniable. Evidence stacked higher than timber. False invoices, testimony from drivers, bank records that told truths with numbers sharper than knives. James handled the lawyers with the steadiness of a man building scaffolds. Lynn managed overtime with soup and jokes. Hung stood among the workers often, sleeves rolled, reminding them that their wages were not favors but rights. One evening when the prosecutor confirmed the trial date, James called Hung. "We will not win quickly," he said, "but we will win clean." Hung replied, "Clean is enough. Clean keeps roofs on houses." And in that moment, the battle at the mill felt the same as the one at home. A fight not for glory, but for continuity, for keeping soup on, wages steady, children safe. It was nearly 2 months after the first Saturday when trouble knocked again. Khan arrived unannounced on a Wednesday night, face wild with drink and regret. "She is my child," he said at the door, "not just yours." Han, startled, cried. Sia stood in the doorway, voice calm but unyielding. "She is ours, not yours alone. Paper says so. The law says so. My heart says so." Hung moved to her side. "Leave now," he told Khan, "and return when you are sober. If you love her, you will not scare her." The old woman appeared, pulled her son back by the sleeve, and hissed words only mothers can say. He left, stumbling, but did not return that night. Inside, Ka rocked Han until her sobs softened. Hung pressed his forehead to the papers pinned on the wall, as if to borrow their strength. They had been written in ink, but tonight they felt carved in bone. Time does what storms and men cannot. It weathers. Khan kept stumbling, but he stumbled less. Saturdays became reliable again. He never stayed past dusk. He never tried to take more than was written. Slowly, Han accepted him, guardedly, with the exact precision of a child who knows who held her through thunder. At the mill, the trial closed with a verdict as solid as oak. Trang's father guilty, restitution ordered, reputation dismantled. Wages caught up, machines hummed, soup lines became shorter because dinner could finally be cooked at home. One evening, months later, Hung stood in the orchard with Ka and Han. The trees were in bloom again, blossoms trembling like shy confessions. "We have lived a year inside a single noon," Ka said quietly. "Noon passes," Hung replied, "but the footsteps return." Han, chasing a butterfly, shouted something incoherent but joyful, and in that instant the orchard felt infinite. Life in their valley never promised ease. Roads would always break, mills would always need repairs, men would always wrestle with pride and paper. But the Lai family had found the geometry of survival, law as spine, love as breath, community as muscle. CA no longer measured days by fear, but by meals shared. Hung no longer counted losses, but counted wages delivered. Han grew, stacking her cups higher, folding paper into more complicated birds. And when thunder returned, as it always does, they no longer feared it. They translated it into syllables, into laughter, into stories told across bowls of soup. Because in the end, what mattered was not who claimed possession, but who kept the doors open, who arrived on time, who turned paper into protection. Noon had lost its footsteps once. It would not again.